please remember these 3 things for success. Keep your audio muted, take notes however you choose, and know that we've added a link to the chat. That's a PDF of these slides, so you can follow along if that works for you. Throughout our summer series, we've been sharing guidance on how to build an inclusive and engaging student culture. Today, we're focusing on one of the most overlooked and yet powerful engaging parts of building a strong student culture: growing students as leaders in your school, in their classrooms, and in life. Let's begin with the why. So a recent poll of educators revealed that engagement is the biggest concern as we move into the fall of 2020 with remote learning. And of course, all the uncertainty for what comes after that. But what is student engagement? It's thinking about how much attention, curiosity that students bring to school. Are they interested? Are they optimistic? Are they passionate, both about your school and about their learning? As we consider the ways to engage our students in the next few weeks, let's focus on how we can provide opportunities for them to be involved and also to cultivate those positive feelings about their school, their learning, and themselves. A sure way to do this is to foster student leadership by making them part of the school instead of just passive receivers of learning. They'll be more connected both to their school community and to you. Let's start by defining student leadership. So Merriam-Webster defines leadership as the capacity to lead, to guide, to go through, to have charge of. This is exactly what we want for our students. These are the experiences that build a sense of empowerment, confidence, and competence that will benefit them now, but also beyond their time with us. In the fall of 2020, to engage students, we need to think about student leadership in 3 different ways. So we need to think about empowering students through leadership in our school community, in their classrooms, but also in their learning and of themselves. So we are going to start by looking at how we empower students through leadership of their school community. So for students, leadership in the school community means that they have voice and that they're heard. So first, voice. You should find ways to keep those student leadership groups you've had in the past few years going. So that might be student council, a principal's advisory group, whatever you had on your campus. Students need that voice and that input more than ever before, so think about ways to keep those going, especially later in the year when some students might be remote while other students might be on campus. But also consider new opportunities for student leadership this year, such as adding student representatives to your committees and task forces. Student leaders also need to be visible and seen by other students. So let's look at some examples of student voice and visibility that could happen this fall at an example middle school. So student leadership in your school community means that students are visible and seen in ways that matter, that actually help to shape and promote the culture of your school. So take a moment to skim this agenda and also the important points on the side. So as you can see in this example, a student representative from each grade is part of the equity task force of this campus. Those students are able to bring valuable input and perspective to the work of this group, as well as those students can play a role in any action the group determines for the campus. So they are both seen and heard. Here's another example students can help promote your culture through student-chosen awards that are aligned with your values and commitments. This is a personal connection for me because last year my daughter was actually given the Communicator Award by her entire grade. This was really meaningful to her because she knew that her peers had seen this quality in her and valued her for it and how she contributed to the classes that she had with them. So you can also have students volunteer or rotate through developing a monthly newsletter that goes out to all students, families, and staff, but is really focused on student-to-student perspective. This would be an opportunity for students to celebrate what they see happening among their peers and all across the campus and community. The staff sponsor could help set up a submission system so that students could contribute stories or pictures whenever they have something to share, and have your student volunteers then arrange that content into whatever newsletter format your school uses. And again, these are different ways that students can have a leadership role in their community by both being visible and having that voice. So now I'm going to ask Terry to share the next how of supporting student leadership on your campus.
Thanks, Amy. Beyond leadership in the school community, but we can also strategically plan for empowering students in the classroom environment, whether remote or in person. Take a moment to skim these classroom environment features. These are features of a classroom where students are set up for developing leadership strengths, but also the habits of leadership, right? So instructional opportunities here include students getting structured feedback on leadership skills from teachers and peers, students leading instructional strategies. Also, these active roles that they would take would keep them accountable and empower them in the learning. Let's look at an example that sort of synergizes cooperative learning and also student-led strategies and routines. Can be used to help foster leadership in the classroom in an academic setting. Take just a moment to look over this example. So you'll notice on the left is sort of a detail of the components that would really take this to a student leadership up a notch. And on the right, I've given you some examples about how it could work in different content environments. This is a fairly common structure where students work in partners to apply strategies and skills. The leadership enhancements, though, here are this. The students are empowered, right? So they have an opportunity for positive academic reinforcement from peers. So if one student is working and getting feedback and affirmation from another, that's an incredible way to build their confidence and also develop communication skills, build relationships in the classroom, and contribute to that classroom community. All to go back to where Amy started with us today about building engagement. These are the things that happen in a learning environment that kids will be engaged in. They'll make those choices and be passionate about it. In addition to building the capacity to learn on their own, the enhancement goes further to increase comprehension and retention. So as we've heard often, the percentage of what we retain goes up with our involvement in an activity. So this sort of strategy puts them in the positive role of teaching and giving feedback to others. So they're really just going to benefit from this in so many ways. And again, I just want to note this sort of strategy could work in person, remote synchronous, or even remote asynchronous if you know, video recording and sharing is a possibility. Here's another example of structures for leading in the classroom environment. Take a moment to review. So we've shared the listening lunches idea with you before. If this is your first time seeing it, it really is just a way to explicitly schedule in relationship building, social emotional learning, conversations, connections into the school day. And again, it would work in any modality, but you can take it up a notch by building in those student leadership habits and skills. You could rotate students early on in the implementation of the listening lunches and let students facilitate. And then once structures are set and practiced with teacher guidance, the students can then become involved with the planning for it and meet regularly with the teacher, prepare topics, facilitate, as well as, really be part of the structure that makes the listening lunches happen. So keep that in mind. And once again, in-person or remote synchronous leading and facilitation can happen with kiddos. If you're remote asynchronous, even the same preparation with the teacher might be happening, but it might turn into providing guided messages for students who are learning asynchronously, prepared, in lieu of discussions or a shared workspace or Google Form. Those could take the place of the power-ups that are on Fridays or the one-on-ones on the Mondays. But again, this can all be guided by students if they get that support to learn those skills and to take that ownership of this sort of thing. Now let's look at some ways that we can purposefully add structures that empower our students through leading their own learning and themselves. Again, these are things we can do as leaders to make sure that every opportunity for student leadership is planned for and provided. Things like anchors, so that they don't have to ask for help necessarily, that first they have something that they own that they can go to when they do need to clarify something or if they need support. Now, providing student anchors is one thing, but we know that we also have to follow up with referencing anchors, right? So if student anchors are there, then we also have to build that habit of using them. So keep that in mind too, that anchors don't just work because they're provided. And of course, by anchors, it could mean anything from, structured notes, advanced organizers, things like that. Also, lessons that have scaffolded layers of complexity can really empower students because they can moderate their own successes and challenges through those layers. And more important than ever is clarity in the learning target, objective, or goal at any given time, no matter in person or remote. Students need to know exactly what they're doing, how to be successful, and why are they doing it? What else is it connected to? Next, recognize that the part of the brain that controls reasoning and decision making doesn't fully develop until young people are in their 20s. So if we're supporting young people in being independent, autonomous learners, then they're going to need our help to learn habits of work, how to manage time, materials, locations, processes. They're going to need continuous supportive structures and feedback in those areas as well, along with regular celebrations. And all of these things will help contribute to the growth of their capacity to learn on their own, teach themselves, and even engage even further in the learning. So let's talk about how to motivate them. If we truly want our students engaged, which is how we grow their capacity, they must be intrinsically motivated. So keep that in mind, that for them to engage in the community and in the learning, they're going to be much more likely to do that if the motivation is intrinsic. So many students, especially those who struggle, are not really motivated by grades, especially not test results. If they have a legacy of failure in that area, it's going to make them feel powerless. So if that's the primary motivation in their learning environment, you may find that students disengage because they don't see any power in that. So how can we get that back? How can we empower them? This list offers us some ideas for that, right? Where can we put in voice and choice? Can we teach them the power of yet and that growth mindset? Make sure they know and they're constantly reminded that failure is part of the journey and that there is something next. There is something next. and advanced organizers and the kind of supports that you can give them to make sure that they're a part of the learning. And also those frequent opportunities to feel successful. All of these things will contribute to really developing that intrinsic motivation for them. Now, one more thing about growing them as leaders of their own learning and themselves is to make them a part of monitoring their own progress. So this one's powerful, not just because it makes them an evaluator of the progress, but it's also a strategy that we find is research-based, evidence-based for just about every student we can imagine. So students from poverty, English learners, students receiving special education services, they can all benefit in some way from being a part of goal setting cycles, conference cycles, and it's very much a part of culturally responsive teaching as well, to have students monitor their own progress. It increases the relevance to the student and thereby getting that engagement that we so need, especially this year. So here's what I recommend for this sort of practice. If we're going to have a system for implementing self-monitoring of progress, make sure that it's focused to a narrow set of standards, especially this year. Monitor performance, yes, but also check in on their attitude and their confidence about what they're learning. Have conversations, conferences, or have them respond in a narrative written way about their progress. Regular goal setting and feedback conferences is really going to empower this process for you in the learning environment and for the student, and to make sure that it's integrated with relationship building. So yes, they track their own goals, but sitting down on a regular basis in a conference, whether in person or virtual, or getting even written feedback, all of that brings a power and a relationship building to this process as well. Let's look at an example. So take a moment to look at this student performance tracker and look for those recommended components that I just talked about. So notice there is a set of narrowed essential standards being tracked, right? So it's not just grades, how are you doing on each test, but literally the skills that you need to build for this course. Are we focusing on the most essential of those? Also, there are multiple opportunities for growth, and the language of the skills is accessible for students. Look at the bottom section. The students have choice in choosing which standards they're going to actually develop goals for. And they'll also have some choice in choosing the strategies that they will employ to meet those goals. They'll have more ownership of the progress monitoring with all of this voice and choice built in, as well as, this format, once again, being supported by regular cycles of conferencing and feedback, definitely going to increase relevance of, making progress on goals for students. And keep in mind that this is very adaptable to any learning modality. These could be living in student notebooks in a classroom. They could be living in virtual classroom areas. They could be a shared workspace for the teacher and student to conference about. A lot of different ways to manage this information, but super, super valuable when building that leadership capacity. So use these examples we shared with you today to inspire efforts at your school to support that student leadership in learning and beyond. We want our students to grow into autonomous learners who have the capacity to make progress and really to be successful in any learning modality. We want them to believe in themselves and their own capacity for successful pursuit of whatever learning or achievement they choose or dream for themselves. And these practices will make these choices and dreams even more accessible for all students. For more ideas to support your school community during this challenging time that's also filled with lots of opportunity, be sure to check out our Road to Recovery Priority Playbook. You can find the Priority Playbook with videos and resources on our website. We're going to add that link to the chat now so you can learn more about that. And we've so enjoyed spending the time with you each week in this summer series, but we do hope you keep learning with us. Part 3 of our Road to Recovery webinar is happening in September to check in on how things are going. We're all learning so much every day through this time. We can't wait to spend that time sharing more with you in September. And I believe we're adding that information to the chat now too. If you missed any of our summer series and you'd like to refer back to them or go back and get some resources or share them with a colleague, you can find the videos, the slides, and other tools on our resource website, which we'll share with you here as well. And then finally, be sure and look for us in the fall of 2020 when we're going to begin our fall learning series for leaders. Stay tuned on social media and announcements for that exciting opportunity. We're excited to see that starting. Once again, I want to thank you for joining us today. We have really find this student leadership in Learning and Beyond super valuable, and we hope that you be able to use that information today. We're going to move into our collaboration time now. So thank you so much for changing your names already. Remember that this is your time, and we will leave the breakout rooms open until 2 o'clock. So we're going to send you to breakout rooms based on the name that you have if you're all here on a common team. If you decide to leave the meeting before 2 o'clock, that's fine. Whatever works for you. We just wanted to give you this space to collaborate. So I'm going to ask our moderators to send you off to your breakouts now. And again, thank you so much for joining us.